This is the intervention generation canvas. It's supposed to help us communicate better, communicate our interventions better, our ideas better, and collaborate with our colleagues a lot better. When you present all the elements of an intervention in one canvas, it's easier to communicate with your colleagues and potentially your partner. So in this episode, I'm going through the 13 building blocks of the intervention generation canvas. Hello and welcome to Dev TV. At Dev TV, we profile ideas, innovations, and individuals doing amazing things in economic development. As we all know, in economic development, we often come up with fantastic ideas that is sometimes difficult to communicate to non-economic development people. So what I've done is adapted the Alex Osterwalder's business model canvas, adapted it to intervention design and communication. So what I did was to, rather than have 9 building blocks that he's got, I have 13 building blocks. And these building blocks are effectively elements of an intervention design that you need to communicate with your colleagues, partners, beneficiaries. And this will just bring clarity, easy communication. More importantly though, it allows greater creativity because you can see how all of the elements of your intervention fits together. So that's what this episode is about. 13 building blocks of the intervention generation canvas. The first building block, and I think I don't really need to say very much about this because this is essentially what we do in economic development. We find out what exactly it is that's causing downward pressure or at least a static situation for our beneficiaries, whether it's income, employment, or whatever else that we're intervening in. So we identify the constraints and we identify the root causes of those constraints. So in this intervention generation canvas, in this one big canvas, you put each of the constraints and the root causes of the constraint on the canvas. So it's become a bit easier for people to see exactly what those things are and how they relate. The second building block is then beneficiaries profile. Now this is slightly more involving than the profiling we do currently. Beneficiaries profiling, in this case, you have to identify exactly what it is, what job it is that your beneficiaries are doing, what pain is it that you're trying to resolve. So you've identified the root causes, but you really need to narrow down or drill down on exactly what element of that root cause causes pain and what's the gain that they're looking for. Alex Osterwalder used this in his value proposition model, but I'm using this in this intervention generation canvas because I think when you're designing an intervention, if you have clarity about the root causes and exactly what pain it causes your beneficiaries and what gain potentially your intervention can bring, then if you can see all of that on the board, you can see the relationship between all of these building blocks, and perhaps you'll be able to do a bit more, to be a bit more creative in the way you design the intervention. So the third element is then the value proposition. In my view, you as the intervention designer, you need to be able to present a value proposition to the project. The project is there to achieve a particular objective, and the donor that sponsors that's sponsoring the project needs to achieve a particular objective. So it's important that you are able to define what those value propositions are for your project. The partners you want to work with, what is it that you are going to go and present to them? What value proposition are you going to present to them? It's important to think through the value proposition. And the value proposition in this case will be a business model using the Alex Osterwalder's business model canvas. So you design a business model. This is not to say that you're being prescriptive to your partners. It is effectively adopting what mergers and acquisitions people use, which is that you identify two companies, you find synergies, and you begin to design the synergy and then engage them after you have designed this synergy. So that's exactly what I thought would be good to bring into economic development. So this is not being prescriptive. This is understanding the role that this partner plays in your value chain and then moving it into a business model and see how you can, or that business model can be inclusive of your beneficiaries. So value proposition for the project, value proposition for the partners, value proposition for the beneficiaries. Because you need the beneficiary to do something, whether action, spend money, whatever else, you have to present them with a proper value, a well thought out value proposition. And generally, this is around the business model that you create for the beneficiaries. So that's the value proposition building block. The next building block then is value proposition validation activities. You need to put this there because whatever it is that you have come up with in your design, even when you're designing it or you're co-creating it as is commonly used, as is commonly known, if you're co-creating it with a partner, it's important that you realize all of the stuff that you're doing in the office are still assumptions. Until you go out and validate those assumptions, it remains an assumption, regardless of how much you know about the market. As you all know, market moves all the time. It's very dynamic. So you really need to go and confirm and make sure that you understand exactly how all of your designs, all your value proposition assumptions can be validated. You need to put all of these activities that you need to do to validate those assumptions in your canvas. So you now have the constraints, you have the value proposition for each stakeholder in your intervention, and then you found a way to validate the value proposition to the partner, project, and beneficiaries. So, expected behavioral change. What we do in economic development is to encourage, facilitate, motivate behavioral change on the side of the partner mostly, because we want the partner to design the business strategy, their business operation, their transaction to be inclusive of our beneficiaries. So if we're going to do that, it's important for us to really identify the specific behavioral change that we need the partners to go through, that we need the beneficiaries to go through. We need to put this up in the canvas so you can relate your value proposition with the behavioral change that you're hoping for. Behavioral change triggers. Now, I've done several videos on this channel where I have explained that incentives, as we often put it in economic development, is simply not enough. As humans, as we're all humans, we're mostly irrational. So it's important to find out exactly what the irrationality that relates to your intervention is, and then begin to see how you can reverse engineer that irrationality to find a trigger that will allow or that will encourage behavioral change at your partner level or beneficiary level. I'll probably do a video on this. I think it deserves a video on its own. So, project relationship, beneficiaries and partners. So this is essentially talking about what it is that you will engage with the partner to do. You're signing an MOU, and what are the responsibilities that you are going to have with a partner. Are you going to be sub-granting? Are you going to be doing a service contract that delivers something to you and you pay them or reimburse them? Or you're going to share risk with them or cost share? Some of these tools I'm really generally uncomfortable with, but depending on the circumstances, depending on the situation, and depending on the partner, you may have to adopt any of this model. But you need to be able to identify the relationship that you're going to have with your partner and make sure that it is compliant with market systems development approach, the M4P. So that's essentially what this is. So you need to know what it is that your relationship is going to be with your partner and with your beneficiaries. So you need to put this on the canvas. So it helps anybody that's looking at the canvas to see exactly what it is that you want to do and how you're going to do it. Channels. How are you going to get to your partners? How are you going to get to your beneficiaries? Is it sort of like the invitation to a workshop, or you're going to do a roadshow? Exactly what is it that you are going to do and how you're going to do it? It's important to include that in the the canvas. So anybody that's looking at your canvas can see how all of these elements fit together. Key activities. What are the precise activities that you need to go through so the interventions can be delivered as they ought to be delivered? To achieve the objective that you really want to achieve, what are the specific activities that you, your partner, or your beneficiaries will have to do? So it's important you put that in so everybody can then be clear on exactly what it is that you're doing. Key resources, as I was talking about earlier. So as a project, you need some resources, either staff, either consultants, either some financing, some equipment. If you have a particular procurement system that you might need to go through in order to get this intervention working, all of these resources needs to be listed. So it is very clear to anybody that's looking at your intervention canvas to see how all of this things fit together and what are the things that you will need. Scale, partner or agent. You have to, in advance of your intervention design, you have to be very clear how you can take this to scale. I know we already do this already in some of the interventions design that we do in economic development. But what is important here is that we put all of this in one canvas so anybody can look at the canvas and appreciate exactly what your intervention is and what it is that it's aiming to achieve. So cost structure, all of this costs money. You have a budget, your project manager has a budget, this has to be negotiated. It'd be good for you to have a fair handle of what potentially all of this will cost. Now, that does not mean you will have everything costed, but what it does mean is that you should have a general idea of where the cost will be at the end of your intervention activities. So, milestones, indicators, and measurement. This is M&E. In my view, you really should not begin to think about designing an intervention without really being clear what your milestones are, what your stages of progressions are. We do this in resource chains already, but the difference here is that you engage with the M&E team and jointly develop a plan for each step of your progression. We do that in resource chain, but because you're trying to communicate a whole intervention, all the elements of an intervention, you're trying to communicate that with whether your colleague, your partner, or your donor. It's important that you put all of this in there so people are very clear exactly what it is that needs to happen. So these are the 13 building blocks of the intervention generation canvas. As I mentioned earlier, what I am likely to do is to do the individual. I may do a video discussing each of the building blocks, but I think the one that probably deserves a bit more attention is the behavioral change building block, the behavioral change trigger building block, the value proposition building block for the project, the partner, and beneficiaries. So that probably will follow this video, but like always, thank you very much for watching, and please leave comment, suggestions, and any ideas that you think will have to promote this intervention generation canvas so we can do our job a lot better and be a bit more effective. Thank you very much for watching.